black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Now let me start out talking about racism. And more, we've got to tell the truth to America about this problem. And the truth means saying to our nation that the roots of racism are very deep in America, and they are still here. And that racial injustice is still the black man's burden and the white man's shame. Now, admittedly, we've made some strides, we've made some progress, but this shouldn't cause any of us to become apathetic or lax or complacent. For me, we must recognize that the plant of freedom has grown only a bud and not yet a flower. And the problems that we face are still very serious. Now we hear a lot of talk these days about the so-called white backlash. I want to tell you what the white backlash really is. It's nothing new. It's merely a new name for an old phenomenon. It is a continued expression of the same vacillation, the same ambivalence that's characterized white society from the very founding of this nation. On the Statue of Liberty, we read that America is the mother of exiles. But it doesn't take us long to realize that America has been the mother of its white exiles from Europe. But she has not evinced the same maternal care and concern for her black exiles who were brought to this country in chains from Africa. And it is no wonder that our slave foreparents could think about it, and they could start singing in a beautiful soul song and a beautiful sorrow song. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. It was this sense of estrangement and rejection that caused our forebears to use such a metaphor. You see, what has happened is that our nation has constantly made a positive step forward on civil rights, but it has usually simultaneously made a step backwards. There has never been a single solid, determined commitment on the part of the vast majority of white Americans on the question of genuine equality for the black man. In 1863, the Negro was freed from the bondage of physical slavery through the Emancipation Proclamation. But he wasn't given any land to make that freedom meaningful. And you know, it was something like having a man unjustly imprisoned for 30 or 40 years, and suddenly you discover that he's innocent, that he's been unjustly jailed for 30 or 40 years, and then you simply go up to the man and say, now you are free. But you don't give him any bus fare to get to town. You don't give him any money to buy any clothes to put on his back. You don't give him any money to get on his feet so that he can rise up once more as a man. But this is what happened to the black man in America. And we must remember this, that at the very same time when America refused to give the black man anything, just said you're free, he was left penniless, illiterate, standing out in a situation not knowing what to do and where to go. But we must not forget that at the same time the Negro was being treated like this, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest. It says that our country was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor, but it refused to undergird its black peasants who were brought here in chains from Africa with an economic floor. And so emancipation for the Negro was freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without a roof over their heads, freedom without bread to eat, freedom without land to cultivate. It was freedom and famine at the same time. And it is a miracle that the Negro has survived.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. This is part 4 of a 4-part series that I've been doing the last 2 months, last month and this month. And this is based on what happened in 1967 and 1968. And that's based on the finding of this, based on this book here, the Kerner Commission report. The premise of this dialogue, these 4-part series, like I said in the last 3 episodes, was because that I'm hearing a lot of people claim that they're shocked by the divisiveness in America in the 21st century, and it just boggles the mind. Before I even continue with this discussion, let me introduce myself. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and this is the Umoja Circle, and whose purpose is to correct errors where errors are found, and to introduce facts when we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. That's the thing about, and unless you dialogue, there cannot be any shift in your consciousness. And a lot of the information that people are bringing out to explain what's going on in America today, you cannot do that unless you understand the precedent, what came before it, okay, what got it to this point. And if you're just being told in the present moment and try to understand the complexity of the world in the present moment, you'll be totally confused and easily manipulated by those who want to maintain power and guide you into directions that they want you to go, not where you might want to go or where this country needs to go. We're still working on, and we're still, in a sense, fighting the Civil War, like I said. You know, it might sound shocking to you, but the ideas. It's not the behavior that you have to deal with. It's the ideas that produce the behavior, and the ideas that form the Confederacy still exists when you listen to people today, especially in the new Republican Party. It's not the party of Lincoln. This party took on those Confederate Democrats, those Dixiecrats in 1964 when Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. One of the words said, according to a witness who was there to sign it, was, "We lost the South." So a lot of these Dixiecrats, segregationists, and all those jumped over to the Republican Party, which was accepting under Goldwater, who was their candidate for president against Johnson. And then you had Nixon, and you had what they call the Southern strategy. Southern strategy means that politically we just ignore black people and brown people. We just focus on the South and the whites there, and we manipulate them to maintain their belief in the Southern ideology that was flowing through, the country in the South through segregation since the end of the Civil War. Okay, so they manipulated that, and they've been following that philosophy, in a sense, since that time to this very day. Okay, that's why you don't have a lot of, because their policies does not benefit black people or poor or women. It just the same type of people who got those poor whites, Southerners, farm boys to go die on battlefields in the 1860s, in places like Antietam and the such. because they told them that their white privileges will be destroyed if black people was incorporated into the society. And they even had the same constitution, people don't realize, that made slavery permanent. That was the Constitution that the Confederacy has. So anybody flying around that battle flag, and that battle flag, and the people who carry that battle flag that you see, or the Confederate flag, they shot at the American flag, okay? They killed American soldiers. They were treasonous. And we had a Confederate battle flag walking through the Capitol building on January 6th. The same mentality. No difference. No difference. Ideas have no sense of time. Laws have no sense of time. We're still stopping at stoplights based on laws that were passed over 100 or so years ago when the automobile came on the scene. So, you got to think in those terms and question everything. Frederick Douglass said a long time ago, I like to quote, "A true citizen is one who is capable of rebuking his government if they do wrong." That's a true citizen. Not somebody who love it or leave it. That's not a true citizen. You're not doing your government because you're going to cause more problems if your government. That's what happened to the Nazis. The problem was not the fact that one man, Adolf Hitler, did everything that the atrocities. It was the millions of Germans, and I've said this over and over again, who followed him, who allowed him to do those policies. And we have the same issue here in America. Not only the complacency of allowing people who are in positions of power politically to do the things that did not benefit the whole. Only a small group, and usually it's the elite. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. I have some videos that I want to start this segment on. We left off about with the riots. I showed you images in the last show of the Detroit riot that shook Lyndon Baines Johnson, when he saw it happen. You got to understand that from 1965 to 1968, there was something like 150 riots in black communities, upheavals. And like we said, in the things like that going on in major cities and small towns. In the last show, these are images of that Detroit riots that shook them. You got military soldiers walking the streets looking for snipers. And it wasn't because we were revolutionary. So those white racists who see this, no, this is frustration. You got a brother there throwing a shoe. This is because of hundreds of years. Then another, of being traumatized by this society. Okay? This is not Beirut. This is not a French city that's being liberated. This is America, and you're talking about divisiveness. Look, a young black boy traumatized by with his hands up in the air. It doesn't matter if it's National Guard or regular troops or police. Okay, the first police department in 1838 in Boston was established. You think they were out there protecting and serving black communities? Or terrorizing, or occupying. You see, there's a difference between policing and occupation. And that's what we have to deal with. All right. So let's move forward. And this is the statement that Martin Luther King said. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there is an important statement that I think you should understand. Let me say this, and this is Martin Luther King. I've always said, and I will always continue to say, that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating, of course. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. This is Martin Luther King. Let's go on to the next one. I'm not going to read the whole this thing. Okay? This is, again, Martin Luther King. who said this. The person that you are listening to now, is that the person that was at the Lincoln Memorial in 1963 talking about "I Have a Dream" and "Little Black Boy"? In fact, that was an ad-lib that had nothing to do with his speech. In fact, the name of the March on Washington in 1963 was the March on Washington for Jobs, Economic, and Freedom. We're saying that in 1963. Black Lives Matter people are saying that today in the 21st century. He said, however, argued that worsening economic and social conditions that Black Americans experience must be condemned as equally as riots. It is here he invoked the line, a riot is, I think it was in May or March of 1967, I think. He said those words. He was dead not too long afterwards. Let's go on to the next one. He asked in 1963, okay, which way are we headed towards as a people in this country, chaos or community? We're still asking that question today, 60 years later. Let's go on. In 1865, let's go backwards again. Again, history is important. We got to understand the precedents. Why people were rioting in 1965 in LA, or 1966, in New Jersey, or 1967 in Detroit, burning things down. This is how we came out. This is after, in 1965, this is after 246 years of enslavement. We wasn't even allowed, we had to ask permission to go everywhere. White America had to tell us what we could do, where we could go, how we could, and when you get that kind of power by law, regardless if there was a constitution, we was just 3/5 of a human being in that, okay? Regardless, we got the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The 13th Amendment said that we would be put back into slavery, basically, at the end of that article, if we went through the court system. Who's mostly went through the court system in the last couple of 150 years? But black men. There's a reason, because of the black codes and all the kind of laws. But this is what we had to deal with when we were so-called freed in 1865. When enslavement ended, African descendants people were free by law, but economically we were socially engineered in a deliberately created underclass. Freed without any economic compensation for the previous, like I said, 246 years of free labor under harsh conditions, which made us an economic underclass, even with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. They like to throw that in our face, that we got this and got that, and we got justices in the Supreme Court saying, well, you had the 14th Amendment, everybody's using the 14th Amendment, but it was meant for us as black people, to be compensated. Well, we don't need that anymore. Justice Roberts, who said when he got rid of affirmative action, we don't need that, because y'all Americans, look. Let's go on. Bogus stuff. We must face this historical truth about having a divided America, like the current racial, economics, and social events are showing America today. Americans' divisiveness is one of the foundational ideas established on these shores from the beginning. We must teach that to these young children who are growing up as going to be future citizens of the world, because they're going to have to deal with the mess that we leaving them. If you see the policies of the Republican Party, who's done absolutely no governing, but authoritarianly trying to dictate by government what we should do, who could vote, who should prosper, which is always the 10th elite. Let me give you this one economic fact today, and then I'll go back into the past. Do you know that the top 487 richest white Americans combined wealth is more than the combined wealth of the whole black population of this country? We spent $1.3 trillion now, but you got 486 people, 400, not 400,000, 486 white families, or white Americans who combined wealth is more than what we make as a people. That should tell you something. We still have economic disparities. I'm not saying it's not poor whites, but they're convinced it's our fault by the same people that look like them, just like the same people who look like them got them into the Civil War. And they paid the price. Let's go on to the next image. This is serious stuff. It is the knowledge of the historical trail that we left behind that is the fingerprint of the life that accurately defines who we are as people today. That's important to understand. If you don't understand the pathway, or you follow the money, the fingerprints of all the issues that we're facing today, if you don't have a clue of where they came from, why we are acting the way we act, why the policies are there, why there is policy that you think is outrageous, that we've always had to deal with. And I'm only focusing a little bit on the economics because King did it, and that got him killed when he started seeing that there's poor whites and he's trying to get everybody together again to combat the elites of this country. He died because of that. You know, as long as he's dealing with his black issue, we could ignore. But then he started getting white folks involved. Black Lives Matter. When George Floyd died in the streets in front of millions of people in the whole world on video, there were young white kids and black kids and white adults all marching together. They freaked out. And they know that we don't know the fingerprints of the history because we think it's done, and then we just go back to sleep. You got to keep on studying. You got to keep on reading books. Let's go on. We must face this historical truth about having a divided America, okay? We talked about that already. Let's go on to the next one. It is the knowledge of the historical trail that we left behind, just like I said. Let's go on with that. The present is always illuminated by the light of the past. That's what I was just saying. That's the one. This is the one I want to stop on. You know, if I'm in the present moment, I park my car somewhere. Okay? In order for me to get up from this spot and get to my car, I have to have knowledge of the past when I got here. It's not in the present moment that I can function without that knowledge. We cannot function without historical knowledge. When you meet somebody new, you cannot just tell them what's going on at dinner in front of you. You got to tell them where you come from, where you went to school. We cannot function as a viable human being without historical data. But yet, how many people out there said history is boring? But we use history every day. You're not going to get a loan at a bank without them giving you a financial history. You're not going to get a seen by a healthcare professional without getting a medical history. You cannot function without history, but yet we're, like Malcolm said, we've been bamboozled into believing that history is born, and the way history is taught is boring to kids who think that there's no issue with history. Why do I need history? I live now. I'm going to get mine now. Yeah, but it's the history that got you to this point. If you want to change and develop and go into the future with changes, you got to understand the history of what you did or what you didn't do to move. Studying and discussing history in the present moment is actually talking about what happened a long time ago that still continues to shape us to this day. Talking about what happened a long time ago shapes who you are now, shapes this country into the country you say you want, but if you ignore its history, then you're going to make the same mistakes over and over again. Let's go on to the next one. Okay? March On was in full march on Washington for jobs and freedom. You know, politically demonstrations held in Washington, D.C. This is just a definition of the March on Washington, with 250,000 people, but it didn't mean anything. If it didn't go on. 3 weeks later, those young black girls were blown up at the Baptist church in Montgomery. The Emancipation Proclamation established that all slaves could enjoy new freedoms. The Declaration of Independence guaranteed unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but all broken promises. Let's go on to the next one. This is what we had to deal with in those 246 years of enslavement, and we're still dealing with people with badges to this day in the black community, no different than some of those slave catchers, you know, where it's instantly shot. You shoot black people without thought in their cars for traffic stops, or I'm afraid for my life. This is not a sheriff, but what it says in 1855, plantation police, runaway slave patrol. This is what we had to deal with as black people. So you're wondering why we have issues in the criminal justice system? Well, this is the foundation of the criminal justice system. This is the foundation of the police department. And the ideas that justify how they treat black people. It's not about protect and serve, it's about control and contain in the red line area that white America told us we could only go, we could only live. And you got these people who were there to make sure the law was enforced. That's what law enforcement and those slave laws will tell you. And I'm gonna go through real quickly. These are some of the things that white America did to us. These are the red summers of white revolts. This is the Black Wall Street, the Ocasee in Florida, where literally whole communities were wiped out. Let's go on real quickly. You see more in the 1920s. This is where we have the Ocasee massacre in 1920. That was before Tulsa race riot, the Black Wall Street. You got Ocasee. All their land was taken. There were 50 million square miles of black-owned land by the 1900s, and by 1970, it was down to 1 million. A lot of that came out of when white people just went and took their land and drove them out of town. Look at more. This is into the 60s. And you're wondering why people blew up in the black cities back then? Let's go on again. They called those things riots, but it's actually a program that came out of the Eastern European bloc, or what Russia did to the Jews and all these other folks, an organized massacre of a particular ethnic group in a particular that of Jews in Russia and Eastern Europe. But it happened here in America. It happened in Black Wall Street. It happened in Ocasee. Okay, we couldn't even drive across country without having a book to tell us where we could go without getting lynched. Let's go on. And the last thing I want to say is this famous word from George Santayana: those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So until next week, or next time, peace, hotep. And I do this for the honor of our ancestors. Bye-bye. Thanks, man. That issue with the Detroit, thank you. If you could, hey, that was great. That was great. Really? Yeah.